Hi, everyone. Hi, good evening. So sorry for the delay. Hi, Dhruv. Are you able to hear me?
Hi, I can hear you. Can you guys hear me? I'm not able to turn my video on though because it says the host has stopped it.
All right. Just a second. Yeah, I think you should be able to turn your video on now.
Wonderful. First of all,
Wonderful.
just a giant apology from my end for how delayed I am. I had an emergency at home and was away from the laptop, and I'm really sorry for the delay, but I'm so glad to be here, Michael, and thank you for putting this together.
No worries at all. I just hope everything's all fine, and
Everything, yeah.
everything's all good at your end.
All good. Everything's now under control. So I appreciate everyone's patience, and I see that there are attendees who are here, and I'm excited, and I'm sure there are people watching as well. But I'm really excited for this conversation.
Oh, that's absolutely fantastic. In fact, we have quite a few folks watching it over YouTube. There are, in fact, individuals even in certain schools, counselors who've actually sent over the link for the YouTube to their students. So, hopefully that they'll actually have a wonderful session. So great. I mean, it's great to have all the viewers here. Let's just wait a couple of minutes more because I think there's a few more individuals joining in. There's a few folks who actually had dropped out and they sort of just dropped me a message that they're joining back in. Really glad to have you, Dhruv. It's an honor, I mean, to interact with you. And we've been sort of having conversations back and forth. I've been looking forward to the session, for quite some time.
Yeah, and I think Michael, you and I both shared the sort of common experience of having done research, having been on this path, and it's something that at least when I was in high school, and I don't know about you, I knew so little about. So I'm excited to sort of create a bit more knowledge and an awareness about it as well, and have a good conversation.
Absolutely. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Great. Uh, okay, I think we can go ahead in that case. So, for the uninitiated, my name's Michael, and I'm an academic counselor and the co-founder of an organization known as EduAIMS, which is an India and UAE based organization working with young individuals to help them gain admissions at their dream colleges. And today we have Dhruv Bhatt. Dhruv is currently a PhD scholar at Oxford University, working at the Department of International Relations, if that's right, Dhruv?
International development.
International Development.
Yeah.
So sorry. And he's in fact one of the directors of the Lumiere Research Scholars Program, which is an absolutely brilliant program. And he'll talk to you a little bit about that particular Research Scholars Program in a bit. He's actually graduated from Harvard University with a bachelor's degree in economics, and he's done an MPhil in international development and has been a Rhodes Scholar from Oxford University. So a guy of many accomplishments and somebody to share a lot of wonderful wisdom with the folks who are watching this particular webinar at this moment. So his research interests are in fact on some of the very favorite topics of mine. He's really interested in education, in employment, and entrepreneurship, and the amalgamation of all of that. And I think when you put education and entrepreneurship together, then you actually really create a force to reckon with. I mean, you can solve most of the world's problems if you just sort of get into that particular integrative area. So wonderful area to go on with. So Dhruv, if you could just start by getting to know more about maybe you could tell us your thoughts about research and how it's paved your career, and how it's managed to help you reach the stage that you're at.
Yeah, absolutely. Research has been life-changing for me. So growing up, I went to a CBSE school in Chennai. I was in the same school from pre-kindergarten all the way through to 12th standard. And I didn't know anyone who had a PhD. I didn't really know what research meant. We had to do these projects for school, but that largely involved looking up information online and then writing it down on a sheet of paper. So for me, research is something that I only got to experience once I started college. And so when I applied to universities, I applied to universities abroad, ended up doing my undergrad degree in economics at Harvard. And that's when I started to be asked to read research papers, to write research papers, to work with professors on research. And it kind of blew my mind that there were all of these people who were spending their entire days and their entire lives thinking about how the world worked, trying to understand it better, and creating new knowledge about the world that other people would read and value and react to in a way that I found kind of mind blowing. And so when I got to experience that for the first time, which was in a summer program, the summer after my second year of undergrad, that really shaped the trajectory of my life. I ended up, as you mentioned, doing a master's and then now doing a PhD at Oxford after undergrad. And I think what I found along the way is that research does three things that are really, really valuable. One is it creates a sense of curiosity about the world, a desire to learn more, a desire to understand better and try and make a difference in the world in the way that you can, which is valuable for every single person. The second is that it pushes you to be a much more critical thinker. So you don't just take things for granted. You ask why, you ask for the data, you try and evaluate it, you try and form your own opinions based on the evidence. And that's so important in anything you do, whether that's in academics or outside. And finally, it teaches you to be a really good reader and writer. So when you're writing a paper, you've got to think about how can you most effectively communicate what your findings are, what the context is to the reader. How do you take this huge amount of knowledge that existed before? How do you take all of the different things that you've done in your own research and write it into a paper that is interesting and reasonable to read? And I think that's something that research teaches as well, that set students up for success in college and beyond. So all of that is why I helped co-found the Lumiere Research Scholar Program, which is a selective one-on-one program for high school and college students from around the world, where they're matched with mentors who are PhD researchers at top universities in the US or the UK. And they work with these researchers to write a 15 to 20 page paper on a topic of their interest. And it's been truly an amazing journey, Michael. We've had now about 800 students from more than 30 different countries do the program. And these students have gone on to be admitted to every single one of the Ivies, to UC Berkeley, UCLA, Oxford, LSE, and Stanford. And so among many other institutions. So it's been nice to see that the skills that I valued in research, being able to create opportunities for other students to engage in it as well, and then to see it tangibly improve their lives and impact their future next steps has been really fulfilling.
Wonderful. That's absolutely fantastic. In fact, the first time I heard about Lumiere was through a student that I was working with. And I mean, I can vouch, for the individuals even attending the webinar, that I've heard of success stories, particularly where Lumiere's played a massive role. I mean, one of the recent success stories is through a fellow counselor who's based out of Delhi. And he's told me about this kid, from a particularly poor background in Haryana or certain area in that part of India, and how he's got a full ride at Princeton University. And it's absolutely fabulous. I mean, his story was really amazing when he was talking about it. So I do know about the kind of impact that you guys are making. And, as you mentioned, I mean, reaching out and having 800 kids sort of participate in these different kinds of experiences is absolutely tremendous. And I think the real, I would say, great aspect about research is the curation of it, the personalization. At the end of the day, I mean, everybody is working on their own projects and their own ideas and their own curiosity that gets developed. And it's not a run-of-the-mill sort of turnkey solution that's being provided to anybody. And that's something that really helps the program stand out, from so many of the other things that are available out there. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. So Gurjeet, the student that you were mentioning, did the program on full financial aid. So his project, I think, was really effective because it speaks to what research can be at its most powerful, which is something that helps you make sense of your own surroundings and that connects really strongly to your personal story. So he grew up in a small town. And he wrote a paper that was inspired by what he saw around him in sort of the lives of people working in farms and in agriculture, and wrote a paper that took a sort of scientific approach to agriculture and tried to understand it from an academic perspective. And so I think really powerful story. He got into both Princeton and Dartmouth on full rides, and will be heading to Princeton in the fall. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing story. Something that I have definitely come across when I ask individuals to sort of explore the possibility of doing research is the statement that research is hard. And that sort of comes back. Research is hard.
Yeah.
I wanted your opinion on, does it have to be hard? I mean, are there any examples of projects that don't need, let's say, exclusive data from, high-end tech institutes or access to fascinating instruments and machinery? Can research be done from home? Can it be done without too much of, the burden of sort of reaching out and going out beyond the extent? So if you just shed some light on that.
Yeah, well, the first thing I want to say is Mahlana, you're a very you're sort of an expert in STEM. I have not taken a science class in STEM standards. So I just wanted to flag, first of all, that research can be done in any discipline. So that's whether you're in the humanities or the social sciences or the sciences, research is something that can be really, really valuable. And absolutely, when people say the word research, you just think of people in a lab using really difficult instruments and doing experiments. And that's an important type of research, but it's only one of many other types of research. So from your own home, you could do things like quantitative data analysis, where you take these data sets that are available online or a survey that you create, and you try and analyze that using statistical softwares to try and understand patterns within the data. You could do a qualitative research paper where you do interviews with people or focus groups or case studies, or where you examine policy documents or archival video material and try and use all of this non-numerical data to write a research paper. Or you could do what's called a literature review paper, where you synthesize findings from previous papers, previous books that have been published. And I think all of these are super valuable forms of research that even professors at top universities spend their time doing. And luckily for high school and college students, that's the type of research that you can do from home, even if you don't have access to, a fancy lab or whatever.
Right. I think, that sort of busts a lot of myths in terms of individuals thinking about research. I mean, the image, working in that lab with that lab coat and sort of getting into all the high tech stuff, but research can be done at home, definitely. I was in fact talking to someone who's currently in high school a few days ago, and she's not just looking to do a research project, but also to pursue a career in research at a later stage. Maybe she's a tech student looking to pursue a career, the current fascination being in artificial intelligence, machine learning, and it sort of might evolve as well as a later stage. But she had a couple of stories, that she shared. She's probably heard them from seniors of hers. Stories about certain nasty supervisors who sort of come in and played, made individuals' lives really difficult at that point of time. So, according to you, I mean, what's the importance of a mentor or a supervisor? What's the importance of finding a right one, and how should somebody go about finding a mentor if they're actually looking for it?
Yeah, no, I think you could try and do research without a mentor, but it's very hard because research is technical, research is time consuming, and it does help to have a guide who can point you in the right direction, give you feedback, and all of that. And so I think the student mentor relationship is super important. And Michael, you probably know this from your own experience as well. When people are picking a PhD program, they're told what you need to look out for, like number one priority is whether you gel with your supervisor or not.
Right.
And so what that means is that, but getting that supervisor outside of a PhD setting is hard, especially if you're a high school student who's going to take time out from their schedule to come and mentor you and work with you, right? So I think there are a couple of different options for students in that situation. One is to try and do outreach. So you could figure out which area you want to do research in, find professors in that area, write emails to them. You might reach out to 50 professors, and 4 of them might respond, and 1 of them might eventually offer to help you out, and that can be a life-changing opportunity. So that's one option, which is go out and advocate for yourself and seek out your own mentors, and that can be really valuable if that succeeds. The second is to try and apply to mentored programs. So there are programs that are set up by universities, by organizations like Lumiere, where they create the structure for you of bringing on board mentors, vetting those mentors, making sure that these are people who are not only content experts, but also personable and engaging and all of that. And I think that ends up being super helpful for students because it ensures that if they're doing research early on, potentially for the first time or one of the first times, that they've got the support needed. And once they have succeeded through a mentored experience like that, that then makes it easier for them in the future if they do want to advocate for themselves and seek out other opportunities or work directly with professors and so on. So mentorship is important. Getting the right mentor is important. And you could either do that by trying to find a mentor yourselves or applying to mentored programs.
Right. So when somebody applies to a mentored program, let's say at Lumia, how does the mentor-mentee match sort of take place? Is there, because this will be on any student's mind, not just in terms of subject match. Is there any sort of process through which they'd be allowed to work a little bit? Is there a trial period, for them to sort of reach out to these mentors, have a conversation before they start? You could just, give us some insights on that.
Yeah, so the way it works is we first recruit a pool of mentors. So we now have a pool of about 400 to 500 mentors who are PhD students or postdocs at top research universities in the US and a few universities in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And with them, we have a multi-layered approach where we first reach out to them, they then apply, we interview them, we have an onboarding and orientation process, they get guidance material. And what we're looking for are mentors who are, of course, smart and doing good work, but also those who are able to explain their work in a way that's understandable and easy for someone who's not in that field or who's starting out to be able to grasp. And those who really are passionate about mentorship, they're personable, they're willing and excited to make time for students. So those are the pool of mentors that we have. Students then apply through a written application. We also interview them, and we use the material from both the application and the interview to try and identify who we think would be a good mentor for them. And we usually do that on the basis of subject area as well as any personality traits or things that we think would be valuable. So for instance, if a student is a bit nervous or shy, maybe we try and find a mentor who's a bit more personable, extroverted than others to match them with.
Okay.
We then go to the mentor and say, we send the student profile to the mentor and say, hey, this is the student we have in mind for you. Here are their interests, here are their goals. Do you think it's a good fit? So that's like the first sense check. Sometimes mentors are like, actually, no, that's not quite what I'm an expert in. So maybe you need to go find a different mentor. But once the mentor says yes, we then come back to the student and share the mentor's profile with the student. And the student can then make the decision about whether to move forward with that or not. And so they do it on the basis of just reading through the mentor's profile, but then they kick the program off, and in almost all cases it ends up being very effective. But in instances where after that first meeting you feel like there's something off, it doesn't quite fit, of course we're happy to come back to the drawing table and try and identify something else that would be a better fit.
Okay, fantastic. Has it ever happened that, somebody would need to, let's say, put in a request, or somebody put in a request halfway through a program wanting to change mentor, or maybe the mentor sort of put in a thought that, it isn't exactly working out?
So on the mentors end, it hasn't come. So mentors have flagged concerns about students. They've said, the student seems overwhelmed, or the student isn't keeping up. But what we do in those instances is not change the student. We try to step in and provide the student the support needed. So we speak to the student, or we speak to the parents. We try and offer them support from the writing coaches. We see if we can change the pace of the work that the mentor is assigning the student, figure out if the student needs to take a break, and see what we can do to get the student back on track. So from the mentor's end, that hasn't been an issue. There have been one or two instances where, as the student does the program, their sense of what they want to do evolves, or they get greater clarity, and they start realizing that this mentor is actually not perfectly suited to guide them. And in those instances, we then either support them with an additional mentor who can provide them feedback specific to that thing that they're looking for, or switch mentors at that point. But it happens in very rare. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
But I think goal is to set the student up for success and make sure that
Right.
they come out of it with a project that they're proud of. So it's definitely an option that's on the table. It's just one that we would be careful of using.
Right. Right. I think, maybe giving them an additional mentor also sort of puts them in a position where they can get new perspective if
Yeah.
their thought process or if their interests tend to evolve
That's
at
right.
that point. So moving away from, the actual process of research, another concern that uh, I get the vibe of when I'm interacting with students, because these are individuals who are sort of starting their career.
Yeah.
And at that stage, there's a lot of apprehension towards failure, in the sense that failure tends to discourage. And then research is something which in their minds is also really uncertain, and it's risky to start off with. And how does research fit into something like that? If a person's going through
Yeah.
the mind where they're frightened and they're a little apprehensive of failure, how does research build into that kind of a structure and help them for the future?
Yeah. I think it comes from a question of asking, what are my goals with doing this research project?
Mm-hmm.
The research that you do as a high school student, especially if you're just starting off with doing research, is unlikely to change the world. And that's just the fact of it, right? Like if professors or PhD students work for years and years to try and create the kinds of insights that can really meaningfully change things. And so what that means is that approaching research from a perspective of, I really want to gain the skills that can help set me on a path towards research. I want to come out of this with a project that I can be proud of and that I can call my own. And I want to make a small but important contribution to human knowledge. And that sort of both parts of that, small and important, are valuable things to keep in mind. So if you approach research with that bent of mind, I think failure is often in your control. So if your goal is to get skills, failing would mean that you didn't put in the effort, or you didn't challenge yourself enough, which is entirely in your control, and it could be something that you do. Other forms of failure might be external. So maybe you are really excited about a data set, but you don't get that data set. But that's totally fine. You can have a backup plan. You can identify a different data set that you can use and analyze that instead. So I think if you come at it with the right goals and put in the work, you're likely to succeed. But even in those instances where you encounter failure, learning how to overcome it is a very, very valuable part of the process.
Right. I think I totally resonate with you on that. Even if they don't eventually end up building on that project or just achieving that kind of success with this want to achieve at the start of it, you still learn a considerable amount during the whole process. Another concern that I've seen a lot of students actually have when they take up independent research specifically is being able to give some kind of validatory proof, to somebody in front of them. Okay, there's one aspect about doing the research, and then there's the other part about putting it all together and then in a way compiling it in a manner that, let's say the AdCom at a later stage would be able to take a look at it. So, in your experience, how should independent research be presented to, let's say, the admissions committee, given the constrictions that are there if somebody's applying to the US for an undergrad program, let's say through the Common App, or if they're applying to the UK through the UCAS, which is even more restrictive. How do you think individuals should have all of that play out so they can maximize the impact on the college admissions process through the research that they do?
It's a good question. So I think there's a number of different ways of doing this, but it fundamentally comes down to what we've heard over and over again from admissions officers, which is the student able to effectively communicate why they did a research paper, what they did in the process, and then how they benefited or changed as a result of it? So that's not something you can do by just saying, I have done a research paper. So it does require you to provide some context. And there's a lot of opportunities to provide context. One is in the activities list or resume, doing things like being very quantitative about how you describe your project. I read more than 30 research papers and synthesized it. I analyzed a data set with more than 2 million data points. I wrote a 5,000 word paper analyzing. All of that, I think, helps lend credibility to what it is you did and the quality of it. The second thing is also describing what you did in the opportunities that you get to describe it. So either in the Common App / UCAS or a supplemental essay or in the interviews, being able to talk about it fluently and comfortably and answer questions about it, I think is important in demonstrating that you actually did it and you learned from it. And the final bit, of course, is that you could look at other forms of validation. So one example of that could be asking your mentor for a recommendation letter. And about 50% of the students who applied early this year for the US college admissions process from Lumiere did get a letter from their mentors. That can be really valuable. And in one case, we had a student from Egypt who applied to Princeton, and the dean of admissions at Princeton actually called up her mentor and asked the mentor questions about the student to sort of certify and validate where the student is at. Or the student could take that paper forward and submit it to a publication or a competition to try and get that external validity. They could do an internship in a related area or write blog posts or things like that. So I think there's lots of different ways to demonstrate that this is meaningful work and that you took it forward, and admissions officers recognize that.
That's great insights. I mean, you definitely pointed out a lot of ways in which students could go about and give that kind of visibility that maybe an admissions officer would look for. And I think getting the recommendation from a mentor is probably one of the best things, because you could get sort of independent validation, from the individual who's actually supervised and in a way knows that particular student and the kind of work that they've done in the best sense. Going a little away from the current topic, something else that comes to my mind is that when students commit to a particular field of education, sometimes they realize that that said decision, might not align with one's passion or the interests that they have. They might suddenly believe that, okay, they're not on the right path. They sort of have to get into another path. And it's something I see all the time. And, I believe that this could happen even while pursuing research. You're into a certain kind of an interest and you're pursuing the research, and that we're in a fast world and the mind sort of thinks that, okay, I need to get into a different direction. So if somebody actually decides to shift paths, be it in careers or subject choices or even a research topic, what do you think is the best tactic to deal with such misalignment in such cases?
Yeah, I'd say, when you're doing a research project, you are doing college or university level work, and you are engaging with it deeply and intensively. And in the best case scenario, and in many cases, students do it and they're like, wow, I really love this and I want to keep doing more of it. But sometimes students don't have that feeling. They do it and then they're like, oh, I never want to think about this subject ever again. And I'm like, that's really, really good for you to find out when you are in 11th grade or when you are still in the process of applying, rather than once you've gone off to college and decided to major in that and then end up really regretting it. So I think it is, even in those instances where you do the project and you're like, oh, actually, this is not a field that I'm as excited by as I thought I was. I think it helps a lot in making a more informed decision in the future. And I think it makes for a really important part of the story as well. So if you end up applying for a related area, then that's totally reasonable to explain that difference. So for example, let's say you did a project in neuroscience and you thought you were going to study neuroscience, but you ended up deciding to apply for computer science instead. You can make a very clear case for how studying neuroscience and the human brain made you realize that what you were interested by was not the biological aspects of how it worked, but rather trying to understand how humans think and those connections and pathways. And that's why you want to study machine learning, because that is where you're able to do try and train computers on how humans think. So that's a very clear sort of jump from one to the other. But even in like cases where that connection is not as clear, I think it's useful to reflect on what you got out of that experience. So let's say you do that project in neuroscience and then decide you actually want to apply to history. And you're not able to make any connections between the two. I think having that research paper on there really, first of all, shows that you makes you a more interesting candidate, because how many applicants to universities in history would have also done a research paper in neuroscience? I think it demonstrates that you're a multifaceted individual and have got multiple different skills. And all of those other things that a research paper does, things like reading and writing, data analysis, all of those are things that universities value regardless of what major you're applying for. So I think it ends up being useful, even in instances where you decide to go a different route after you have done the paper.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's absolutely fantastic. And I think the example that you gave, if somebody's, let's say, done a project in neuroscience and then after it looks to get into computer science,
Yeah,
the story that they could tell, it'll really form an extremely compelling story. I mean, that's a fantastic example to put across. So Dhruv, what's the plan for Lumiere? Where do you see yourself taking it? What's the
yeah,
future going to look like? You could just share some thoughts on that.
absolutely. So we want to be the premier, world's best research program for talented and ambitious high school students from around the world, such that whether you're a high school student in India or the US or South Africa, and you're someone who is smart and motivated and interested in research, Lumiere is what comes to mind when you're thinking about engaging in high school research. So that's the goal, and I think we're making progress towards that. And the idea there is that we want to create opportunities all around the world, because we think that these students with potential and students who are excited to do research are located all around the world, but the mentors tend to be, especially mentors who have the best set of qualifications or the most levels of experience, tend to be located in certain areas in the US or the UK. And we want to try and expand and match those people and bridge those gaps all across the world. In the longer term, I think that the goal of Lumiere is to think about project-based learning more broadly and try and understand how we can enable students to have really meaningful academic experiences outside of the classroom, in places where they can apply their knowledge and do hands-on work in the form of a research paper or a machine learning project or other things as well down the line. So that's sort of how we think about it, which is our short-term to medium-term goal is to be the world's best and most successful research program for high school students. And then our longer term goal is to transform how high school students learn through project-based learning.
Okay, wonderful. I've interacted with quite a few individuals and sort of try to provide research-based mentorship. And I think Lumiere is definitely on the right track. So all the best with that. And I'm sure you guys will do amazing in the field that you're setting out to. Any sort of final comments or advice or a message that you want to give to the attendees?
Yeah, I think research has really changed the trajectory of my life, and I feel like I've talked a lot about myself, Michael, and I'd love to hear a little bit about your reflections on this as well. But it's really changed the trajectory of my life, and I hope that students give themselves the opportunity to experience that as well, hopefully with Lumiere, if not through other research opportunities. And if you are interested in applying to be a part of the Lumiere program, our summer cohort is coming up in June, and the application deadline for that is 15th May. So do try and get your applications in before that. If the summer is not the right time for you, we also run cohorts in the fall, in the winter, in the spring, and applications will open for those in a couple of months. But upcoming deadline is May 15th for the summer. And so that's everything from me. And Michael, I'll pass it to you for the last word, to share a little bit about your own sort of experience with research and what you think, how you think high school students should engage with it.
Definitely fantastic. So, I mean, research is really sort of impacted my way of thinking and the way I take things forward. So one of the things that I've been told a lot is about myself, about my personality, is that I'm a very analytical individual. And I think a lot of that draws from my experiences in research. STEM as an area, as a discipline in terms of research, does require quite a bit of discipline and dedication, and definitely access to certain kinds of facilities which aren't normally available to a lot of people, at least at an earlier stage. I think now, when we're in the digital age, when we're actually at a time where you could get, as Dhruv pointed out, you could get data sets online, you could have you could use programming tools, you could sort of in some way or the other align your interests with the different kinds of studies in different areas. Things have really evolved, but if you're still looking to get into experimental research, then there's the requirement to get into some kind of maybe a project lab or working with faculty in a certain kind of institution. So personally, I felt that research is something that can build very critical skills that an individual would require to go on and become successful in any part of their life. If they're looking to build skills such as discipline, such as an analytical mindset and analytical approach, and specifically research at the end of the day is, I would say, half about what you do and the other half about how you present it and how you put it across. So even in terms of ability to write or to communicate your ideas and your thoughts to others, that's also really, really important. And it's developed extremely well when it comes to research. And my experiences of working with individuals from different parts of the globe over the years has led me to believe that certain demographics and certain individuals are lesser exposed to what research can do for them and the kind of wonders that can actually bring. But research shouldn't really be looked at as something that you do. Rather, it's more of a mindset or a lifestyle, that you could incorporate. If somebody wants to, or rather takes up the curiosity-based approach, then that's research. We're all born researchers. When you walk into, let's say, a primary school classroom, you'll find them asking all sorts of questions. I mean, why is the moon round? Or, why does water taste the way it is? Why isn't there any taste at all? I mean, they're all born with that research-based mindset, that thought. And over the years, it's important to nurture it. And of course, programs like Lumia, different experiences, independent research that you could take up by yourself as well, are just ways in which that very natural inclination can be brought out and maximized so that you can get the skills that would go on to make an individual successful. So that's my perspective. It's helped me tremendously. And I still do carry on research on the side. I'm still very involved in certain research on various time series based data. I like to study earthquake time series, and it's something that probably would take up another session altogether, if we get into all of that. So this has been fantastic, Dhruv. Thank you so much for taking out the time, for joining us, for sharing such wonderful insights, and for giving the attendees and the viewers, I think, a lot to think about, a lot to introspect about, and most importantly, something to build on in terms of, to take home and to build on so that they could take promptive and life-changing decisions going forward. Wonderful. So, I mean, that's it from my end. Thanks so much, Dhruv. You have a good evening, and take care. Take care, everyone.
Lovely. Thank you all so much. And thank you, Michael, for this opportunity. I really appreciate the work that Area Ames is doing, and good luck with it. And excited to continue this conversation in the future as well.
Definitely.